These are two examples of smocking that mimics weaving. This one here is called lattice smocking or American smocking or basket weave smocking. And this I call the braid. They're both variations on a theme. Now, to make these work, you want to really understand how to generate the pattern because it works on a grid. So to do that, I'm going to default to illustrations to explain how to get the pattern. From the pattern, then we'll come back here and work in the fabric. For diagramming this video, I'm using a grid of 1 inches square. You could actually make this any size, but I've imposed a grid, and then later in the illustrations the grid will drop away so you can see the pattern. In the first frame here, you can see the pink square in the upper right hand corner. Notice that I have 2 dots and then arrows pointing towards each other. That represents 1 point, and that shows which way they will stitch. As we move along, the next one over, you have the blue square. You see that the dots and the points are pointing opposite, and then you have another square, the third one over, which they're pointing vertically again. Moving right along, you see we have a whole row now. So you have horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal, and vertical. So this sets up the pattern. Continuing on, I have another row below that. You can see that everything alternates. So where the blue one is horizontal, the one below it, red, is vertical, and so forth. In the next frame, I will drop out the grid, and I've repeated this. So it looks like a checkerboard. You can see better here the vertical and horizontal. The verticals are pink, the horizontals are blue. So this is the grid as I draw it. But when you lay it on the fabric, the grid needs to be on the diagonal, on the bias. This doesn't work very well if you put the grid straight of grain. So the grid should be on the bias. So this frame here shows the grid and the pattern as you would mark it on the fabric. So next, I'm going to mark the grid on the fabric and mark the spots on the grid, and then we can get going sewing. This is how the grid would translate to fabric. What I have done here is I've marked the grid on the bias. This is a 1 inch square here. I've marked it with the disappearing pin, the friction pin, these here. And then I have come in and I have marked the smocking indicators on the grid, like in the illustration. I like to use a little T. So the T, it tells you this intersection here, that's going that way, that's going this way. So these two come together and stitch. You'll see that in a moment. But you can mark it directly on your fabric, or you could make a template. Both are correct. Now I'm going to go to the pressing table. I'm going to press this to make the grid disappear. I'll bring it back here and you will see the results. So here I press everything. The grid hasn't entirely disappeared. This is one of those things about this particular pen. You want to actually test it. But since we're working on the back, this is not going to be a problem. You can see that on the front, the grid didn't read through, so all is good. So the fabric is set up for the smocking. The next step will be smocking itself. So I will demonstrate that for you. Okay, I have my needle threaded up. So really what you're doing is you're catching these 2 points, bringing them together, stitch 2 or 3 times, then carry your thread over, pick up the next two, now you don't pull the thread tight, you leave the thread like so. And then you jump over to the next. Now you don't have to follow any order as long as the points are sewn together. You're all good. But this is it's a variation of what's called dot pickup smocking. So again, okay, you don't pull that too tight, you let the threads travel underneath. And pick up these next two. Again, don't pull the thread too tightly. So yes, you're picking up two dots, you're putting them together. And we just keep following along. And that these occur on the bias will make everything drape nicely. Okay, so now finish one row. Now let me start back again. And so the next set of rows here. So yeah, so here we are here. I'm going to start back here. Pick these two up. These next two here. Again, don't pull that too tight. Then these two here. Now you're going to have the thread traveling on the back. The back is not going to be pretty like the front. And that's okay. So in this situation, again, it may get a little confusing, but don't despair. You just keep stitching the two dots that want to go together. Let's see if I can get one more off this thread. Yes, I think I can. Okay. So we'll bring that together, and I will knot off because to end my thread, so let me zoom out. So that's what it will look like from the back. And from the front, you can see it's starting to fall into folds. So I will stitch all of this, get it all finished, and bring it back, and then show you the result. Almost finished. And you'll see in a moment, the back doesn't have to be pretty. You're assuming the back is going to be lined. One more. And I'll turn it over and show you the result, which is going to be so surprising. Okay, now the big reveal. This kind of sets everything. Okay, you ready? Ta-da! So it creates the illusion of woven fabric. Now, little things like this, you can go in and sort of style the folds so that everything looks tidy. But that is the aim. This is called American smocking, basket weave smocking, lattice smocking. It's in the woven fabric because it looks like weaving. Next, the braid. For the braid smocking, we're going to be using just a section of our template that we used for the basket weave smocking. So you can see here in the first illustration, I have marked out a section of that particular template. The rest is in gray because that's going to disappear. From here, in the next column, you can see I've grayed out some of the smocks on the outside of the motif, closest to the line. You can see the black ones, the black markings are the ones that we're going to keep. Everything else will disappear. So that in the third illustration, I drop the background out. So you can see here I've erased the ones that we don't want, leaving the black ones, which are the ones that we're going to be using for our smocking for making the braid. And finally, the finished pattern. This is what it looks like. So we're just going to be using the smocking points that have arrows. So moving along to fabric, you'll get to see how it looks when it's marked on the fabric next. Here I have the fabric marked out for the braid based on the illustration that we just covered. Now I will show you how to sew this to create a braid. When looking at the two marks, it looks like everything points in that direction. So that is the direction that I like to run the smocking when I'm sewing it. So let me sew this for you. It sews the same way as the basket weave smocking, dot pickup. There. And we pick up these two. Then these two. There we are. we alternate back and forth, heading in that direction, these two next. I'm going to pick these up, then I'm going to sew the rest of the row off camera and bring back the results. And we're at the end. Here we are. Zoom out. So let's do the big reveal. There you have it. It looks like braided fabric. So this is the braid. Both projects finished. Lattice smocking and the braid.